Well, good morning, everybody. This is Michael Parrish. I'm the Senior Vice President of Client Development here at Halo Therapy Solutions. Here we are, another episode of Inside the Wellness Mind. I hope everyone is having a happy holiday, a safe, fun, and merry Christmas season. I am pleased to bring somebody that's near and dear to our hearts here at Halo Therapy Solutions. And by the way, I'm also joined by my colleague and close confidant, Jess. Jess is our sales and success manager. And so we have a special episode today. I know I say that a lot, but I guess they're all going to be special because everybody who pops onto this program is special in their own right. And we have that person here today. She's been a friend, an ally, a consultant to our company for a number of years, and we might get into how she met our founder, Steve Spiro, and our team. I'm sure we'll get into some of that. I'm eager to hear about it from your perspective.
Mm.
But we have Amy McDonald. Amy is the founder and CEO of Under a Tree Consultancy. Amy's been in the wellness world for 30 years plus, and Amy is the 2024 Global Wellness Summit Woman in Wellness, and that is a very notable accomplishment. Congratulations on that, Amy. And I'd
Thank you.
just like to tell you that I was looking forward to this episode because we're going to be able to get into a lot of crossover topics. Obviously, wellness, your background, your insights, and you have intimate knowledge about our company and our technology. And without further ado, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to Inside the Wellness Mind. How are you doing, by the way?
Well, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I mean, you can get into my wellness mind. Uh,
Yep, that's
it's,
what we're going to do.
it's chaotic. So we can just go.
Uh, okay, good. Well, that's the title is apropos. Then I love it.
Yeah, I thought so
We got
too.
to get into your wellness mind because I've gotten into some minds that weren't necessarily wellness, but fitness and all kinds of other avenues. But yeah, all roads seem to lead back to wellness in today's day and age. So that
Well,
word.
it's a broad term that encompasses, through my lens anyway,
Hmm.
encompasses a lot. Um, yeah. So.
Well, I read a. Obviously, we all read a lot of LinkedIn. You see a lot of LinkedIn posts, and so I want to using today's post that I saw from you, and it said you've been in wellness. I didn't know this, but I guess I should have known this. But it looks like it's 30 years plus. So take me back, if you will, 30 years ago. What drew you into wellness, and what were you doing at that point in time, and what was the inspiration for that that entry into this amazing world that we all know and love?
Well, it starts 40 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, 30 is sort of the published amount, but it's
Which is
longer than
crazy
that.
because you're only 45.
Yeah,
Did you
exactly.
do
I
that?
started when I was 5 years old. Um, so there wasn't any strategy to how I got to where I am. I mean, I think for a lot of us, right, that have been doing something for quite some time, we can look back and sort of see the progression of how we got to where we are, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we knew what we were doing at the time. And
Mm,
I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, I guess wellness was sort of an important part to me, but it wasn't called that at the time. But I started as a massage therapist and an esthetician, and that would have been in my 20s. And I, quickly realized that I didn't want to do facials, and I was really massage was really important to me. And so it's a very unglamorous kind of progression, but I think if I look at all the different types of work I did, it was always about creating space for celebration.
yes.
Because in my
Love
20s, I
that.
was an event coordinator separate from doing massage. And so we would create these incredible one night or weekend events. And in some ways, what I do now is I'm creating stuff, although it's in the future, it's similar. Like, how do you create experiences that are going to honor and celebrate the people that are coming to whatever it is, right? And obviously, in wellness, they're typically looking to optimize their life and the way they're aging. And so it was just a progression through my 20s. It was in my 30s where I moved to Mexico. I left Canada, ran away from the
Wow.
snow, and I moved to Mexico and convinced this owner of a small hotel in a very remote area that's still quite remote, north of Cabo, an area called East Cape. And I convinced him to give me his hotel because he would close
Wow.
every winter. He closed, and he said, we have really strong wind. No one's going to want to come to this hotel. And so we always closed. And I said, well, I think we can market this to desperate Canadians in the cold weather. And he said, well, they're not going to come because they want to be at the beach. And I said, yeah, but there's all this other stuff going on, right? There's the mountain villages and there are hot springs and all kinds of stuff. So I created all these programs of other types of experiences. And it wasn't a beach resort. Like it wasn't,
Mhm.
that's not why people came. And what I learned from that was it's all about redirecting, right? It sometimes it's
Yes.
not looking at the box in front of you. It's actually looking outside of that. And so that's really been a theme throughout my career. And so what I gained from that was I created a permaculture garden. And people were like, what are you doing? Like, what's permaculture and why are you building a garden, right? And I
Yes.
was like, well, because there's no fresh vegetables in this area of Mexico, and I don't know how to do it, but I'll find someone that knows how to do it. And so slowly what I saw was how it connected people back to nature. This is 30 years ago, right? And so to see like a grown man really, emotional because he's picking cherry tomatoes off a vine. And so I always saw wellness as whatever it is that makes you connect back to yourself or back into the moment, and simple, right? And so it was that idea of wellness that struck me. And so that's why I have always said that I'm in the wellness business. Yes, we had treatments. Yes, we had yoga. Yes, we had fitness and we had hiking, but it was all the other stuff that we did, like going out into the desert and coming back with herbs and making tinctures that are really good for you. And so I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. I just did what I felt just made sense. And
Yes.
so I ended up getting discovered down this really long 6-mile dirt road, and an article got published. And this is sort of the abbreviated story, but I ended up at Miraval here
Wow.
in
Okay.
Tucson. I immigrated to Tucson, to the U.S., and what I loved about Miraval was, yes, it had a spa, but it had unbelievable programming, like a horse program and lots of different things. And because of that, I thrived in that environment, right? We created all kinds of experiences that brought people together, that got them to connect with themselves. It was all about mindfulness. And so it became really well known. Oprah discovered it during the time that I was there. And I made a name for myself. And so I decided to start the company 20 years ago with wellness is everything. It's the person that smiles as you're walking down the
Hmm.
hallway, that's the cleaning person, or it's the maintenance person.
Yes.
Like it's not, we can try as hard as we want to touch people, emotionally touch people, right? But it's often those moments. And so, creating an environment that is really present, I think
Yes.
is overrated. So anyway, so Miraval was an incredible experience. And so I hung up my shingle and went, I don't know why everyone isn't doing this. Why is everyone so focused on only fitness and only spa treatments when there's
Mm.
all this other stuff, right? That
I
is
love
more
it.
that's more profitable. So anyway, Under a Tree took off quickly, and really
What
we
was the what
yeah,
was
go
the
ahead.
inspiration for the name Under a Tree? Because that's a great name.
Well, thank you. People thought it was crazy when I came up with the name. So the actual legal name of the company is Amy McDonald and Associates. Super boring, and a couple of years in, I hired women that wanted to work from home, who had small children and didn't want to go back to their corporate lives. So I hired incredibly talented women that were in a time in their life where they wanted to work. They had a lot to offer, but they also didn't want to compromise, uh, the early years of
Mm-hmm.
their children. So all of us were in the same position because I gave birth to my daughter the same year that I gave birth to the business. So anyway, I couldn't run that business without them. I never wanted to be alone, right? Because wellness
Mm-hmm.
is so complex and so diverse. And so I
Yes.
hired subject experts. And I felt fraudulent, like the company can't be called my name, right?
Right.
So I got clients together. I had, some of my team on the phone, and I had a woman that was a marketing person. And out of the blue, someone said, "Oh, working with you is just like being under a tree. You feel safe, you feel heard."
Okay.
And I mean, it was as simple as that.
Because
Because
that's fantastic because I've always wondered about it. We're all busy and we're meandering through our lives and we have all
yeah,
these obligations. And then, we have our colleagues and folks that are important to us. And I've known the name of your business, didn't know the inspiration for it. I always wanted to ask that question.
yeah,
Pretty cool.
I
Yeah.
and now people really, I think, understand it more. But when you think about a tree,
Hmm.
through as a species, we've often run to trees to stay warm, to stay dry. There's a lot of biodiversity that happens under a
That's
tree,
right.
and
I think of biophilic design,
yeah,
right? Which that being in touch with, you know, plant life and nature and so important. I want to touch on something that you mentioned because it's interesting as I'm hearing about the complexity of wellness because it is indeed complex, but perhaps it's complex, yes, but even more than that, maybe broad and diverse, and it means different things to different people. And I was thinking about an upcoming trip out to California. Naturally, I'm heading out there for business, but I always like to weave in wellness, which we'll talk about more later. But weave in wellness wherever I go,
of course.
and even as somebody who's hopefully this doesn't come across as haughty. I've worked hard, super fit, at various times in my life. It's always been important to me. But that's not the first thing that I was thinking about enjoying when I have a pocket of time out there. You know what it was? It's getting down into the high desert mountain ravine and getting down into the
Mhm.
desert wash, getting out into the crisp mountain air, no noise, just nature. And that is more for me cathartic to the soul than if I was to go find a gym somewhere. Even though
Ab-
fitness is important to me, but
Absolutely.
wellness is so much more than just like you said. So much more than fitness. That's important, but that's
Well, fitness is part of it. It's a really
part of it,
important part of
right?
it. Yeah, really
It
important
fills a
part.
different cup of you, I feel. There's different cups that
Mm,
get filled, and silence and
yes,
nature is very different than moving your body and physical activity. So they're both
Well,
important.
yeah, yeah. I love that, Jess. That's a great way to sum it up, or to look at it. So I view fitness as for me, it's just been a necessity. It's a part of physical wellness, but it's not as
Identity.
meaningful to my soul as a desert wash
Mm-hmm.
excursion where very few people get to step foot. Those kinds of things are they make me feel more well, if that makes sense, than
more whole.
fitness. More
Yeah.
whole, exactly. Yes, I love that word. What
But
a great word.
sometimes fitness is a gateway. I think
Hmm.
about, in order to calm ourselves, right? In order to actually get deeper into ourselves and into whatever environment we're in, there's all that energy release that happens with fitness, right? So often it's the first thing to do, right? When is
Hmm.
to to work out, to sweat, to kind of push yourself, right? To get really focused on your body, and then it's easier to focus on everything else.
Yes.
Anyway,
Right.
fitness
Yeah.
is incredibly important, and it was so interesting over the years. For a while, it was like we had to have fitness, right? And then, oh, well, we have to have a spa. And then fitness kind of took a back seat to these spas that we were building. And I'm going back, obviously, many years. And then all of a sudden, even pre-COVID, fitness started to get the prominent views, like, no, we're not going to have it in the basement, or like, here, we're going to have it right
Yes.
where there's a view. Like, it started to shift even before COVID. And then we all know, of course, what happened with COVID when it comes to fitness, right? But it is absolutely one of the most important pillars of wellness to me.
You know, speaking of COVID, a thought surfaces in my mind, and so we'll probably mention Lisa Stimmerly at some point in time as well, and talk about her and her importance with her connection with our company. But one of the things that I heard her say a while back, and certainly it makes sense now with my purview and in my experience dealing with hundreds of wellness clients, let's call them. COVID. You mentioned COVID. COVID seems to have been, it seemed at the time we were going through it to be something that was, well, it was earth shattering in many
Yeah.
ways to businesses, to talk about a time period where you were forced into to shutterdom. We were kind of shuttered across across the country and the world, and businesses took a hit. Wellness, fitness, a massive hit. But man, COVID has turned to have another side to it, which is it seemed to have been a slingshot that has now catapulted various industries. Do
Yes.
you believe that that springboard that it was, and it wasn't fun while we were going through it, but it seems to have caused a springboard reaction and a, let's say, a skyrocketing of interest in fitness and wellness and this resurgence and a commitment toward that. I I'll let you answer it, but my sense is the reason there's been this massive shift back into wellness and fitness, and these industries are growing like crazy now, is because I think that we were shuttered. We realized that we were on the treadmill of life. We said to ourselves, I believe collectively, that when I get the green light to go live my life normal again, when it's safe to do it, I'm gonna I'm gonna make sure that I have a life that's not just chasing a dollar bill. It's not just me being on a treadmill. I need to make and prioritize how I look, how I feel, my health span, my lifespan. I think that caused us collectively a world to reprioritize some things. What do you think?
Oh, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, fitness in particular was the one thing that we could control, because there was so much out of control in all of our
Mm-hmm.
lives during that time. And fitness was accessible, right? I mean, even if you couldn't go to a gym, I mean, I remember trying to buy, I was living in Canada during that time, and I decided I wanted to buy equipment, and I called some of my connections, and they were like, "Oh, we're out of everything," right? Because we all started building home gyms, and
Yes.
um, and understanding how empowering it was to be able, to do that. And I mean, it's a silver lining. It was a wake up
That's right.
call. And obviously we didn't know the extent of any of it, of the hardship, but also of the silver lining of it. And I think at the same time, what was happening was technology, right? Because it was sort of the perfect storm. We came out of COVID with technology was growing, and even before COVID, we started seeing uh, sports performance, like starting to get clients calling and saying, we're doing an athletic community. We want one of the best, sports performance centers in all of Hawaii or wherever it was. And so there was a couple of things that happened, right? Just before COVID, the seeds were getting planted for the way that athletes recovered from
Mm-hmm.
fitness. All of
Right.
that started, right? Functional fitness was coming in, like fitness was already starting to percolate into something much more activated, than it had been traditionally. And so then when we went into COVID, that the technology continued to grow, right? And so people did, I mean, saunas were selling like crazy. And so I think and then with technology, we ended up coming out of COVID with all this touchless wellness. And then even though we've
Yes.
had it before, now it really made sense,
Yes.
right? So I think it was
Yes.
technology. I think the consumer was starting to really want something different. They wanted to understand more of what the, high performing athletes were doing, but also how they were recovering. And so it was that trifecta of just the perfect timing. So when COVID was over and we were all released, first we wanted social,
That's right.
which I think is a trend that is not a trend. It's just here to stay.
Mhm.
But technology continued to grow, and so now fitness and wellness in general is much more accessible. So it's an interest. It's interesting. I mean, a lot of people think that fitness grew out of COVID, but it was already starting to shift.
It was, yeah. So let me ask you this, because now we're on this topic. It's interesting too. I heard, and Jess, let me know if you heard of this or not. I read about a study, and again, I'm going to put a Joe Rogan type of disclaimer out there. I know that everything we read is not necessarily entirely accurate, but I read it from what I remember to be a credible source. And so they did a
Mhm.
study a couple of years after COVID, or perhaps during COVID is where it began, and it was called the Zoom effect. And so that was curious to me. I said, well, what is the Zoom effect? Well, what happened is we all started getting on Zoom, and we all know, because we're all looking at a camera now, that when we see ourselves on camera, cameras are pretty harsh. I mean, there's filters, and some
Oh, we
cameras are
love
better
those
than others.
filters.
Yeah, but generally, people got on Zoom because that's how we had to have our meetings to push business forward, and people didn't like what they saw. And so people said, "Oh my God, I look terrible." And so there's this effect that created in us where we said, I don't like what I see. I don't like how I feel. I need to improve what I'm looking at, and I'm going to do something about it. And that created this sort of Zoom effect where we said, all right, I have to do something about this human that I'm looking at that looks tattered, tired, worn, downtrodden, and any other descriptive you can think of. And that is also some of what caused people to, as soon as they got the green light and they could get back out into general population and live a normal life, they were prioritizing aesthetics, of course, and taking a more holistic approach to wellness.
Yeah,
That's called the Zoom effect. Did you guys hear about that? If not, look into it. It's pretty interesting.
I've never heard of it, but it makes a lot of sense.
it makes total
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So, because there's so many factors that have led to, and this is where I get back to what I've heard Lisa Simmerly say, our chief revenue officer, that COVID for Halo Therapy Solutions, but wellness generally and broadly was like it was like a hockey stick after that. Just once we got through it, wellness started to take off, and our company in particular started to experience some
Yeah.
phenomenal growth.
Well,
So,
and
with our company in mind, yeah, go ahead,
I was
Amy.
just going to say halotherapy in particular because it dealt with, right, it supports the respiratory system.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was
Yes.
positioned more than other touchless wellness offerings, right? It was positioned to really obviously in combination with infrared, but the respiratory piece was, I mean, extraordinary timing.
Yeah, extraordinary timing, especially when you think about the only modality that naturally addresses respiratory health
Mhm.
the way that it does, right?
And
So,
Exactly.
yeah, go ahead, Jess.
I was just going to say, and before COVID, I think respiratory concerns was very few and far between. It wasn't on the top of everybody's mind. I think uh, there were other
Yeah.
health, things that people were prioritizing and focusing on, but COVID really
Yep.
prioritized respiratory health and, halotherapy being what it is. I
Yes.
think it absolutely was that skyrocket.
That's right. I always say to the myriad people we speak to, it doesn't matter what you thought of the origins of COVID. None of that even matters, because what COVID did do to humanity writ large, no matter what someone's perspective was,
Yeah.
what it did do and has done is it caused everyone to be keenly aware of the need for respiratory health. That's what it did do. So, like you said, Amy, halotherapy it was just sitting there, and that wave was building up, and then all of a sudden, because it's the only modality that addresses respiratory health, it gets swept up, and we're experiencing that growth now. I mean, seemingly everybody that we're talking to
Hmm.
is starting to look for halotherapy, especially when they learn what halotherapy actually is. So, So this leads me into something I'm very curious about. When when did you meet our fearless founder, Steve Spiro? How did you come across our company and because you're one of our most important consultants, if not the most important, and you've
Well,
helped us
thank you.
discover some pretty important projects here. So how did you meet him?
So the story, I mean, you've heard the story, but I'll talk about Steve's part. So Steve is a serial entrepreneur, as we know,
Yes, yes, he is. So you are
and
Steve, if you're listening.
he moves into industries he does not know anything about.
Hmm.
And the first thing he does, he searches for experts because he knows he needs to surround himself, right?
He's
And
so good at
so
that. Yeah.
he went on some some Google search at the time and found, I think, a list of like 30 spa consultants, and reached out to all of them. And the story goes that I think like 5 responded.
Okay.
And I was one of them. And, and he basically said, this is what I'm doing, and this is a company I own, and I, want to get into hospitality and the wellness industry. And so I did respond to him, but I thought he was crazy. Like I was like, he wants me to be on his board. Like I've never done anything
Ugh.
like that, and I don't know what he's talking about. And anyway, he was persistent, and I was one of the only people that actually responded to him. So
Yeah.
anyway, he continued, and I was living in Canada. My father was at the time he was at the end of his life, and he anyway, sorry, my Zoom was trying to communicate with me. Um, so I was in Canada. It was February, and it was really cold. And Steve called again and said, "Look, like, what is it going to take for you to help me?" And I just said, "I think we need to meet because I don't really like what you're asking me to do is something I've never done before." And he said, "Well, don't you know the wellness business and hospitality?" And I was like, "Right." He kept asking me these questions, and I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, that's what I like. Let me fly up." And I said, "You're going to fly up to Ottawa? Like it's minus 20? Really?" And that's what he
Yes.
did. He flew up, got a hotel close to the airport, and took me to lunch. And wine was involved because he'll always tell that story. He always exaggerates how much wine, but
That's
anyway, and he
funny.
just convinced me of how meaningful it would be for us to work together. And so that would have been 9 years ago. Yeah.
And that was at a point in time during our company's existence where all we had at the time is what? Just a halo generator?
I remember seeing the pictures of the tents. Like
Oh, we had the
there
pop
was
ups.
The Halo
Okay.
pods.
they
Yeah.
and they were mostly for allergy clinics,
Yep.
right? And now I can't even remember. I think they might have had a generator, but it was for clinical setting
Yeah.
for treating asthma and different types of obviously respiratory stuff. And he was like, "Well, why can't we put this into spas?" And I just thought, oh my God, right? Like, but we figured it out. And,
Yes.
we came up with something that was portable, that could be moved around. It didn't look really great at the time, but the function of it made more sense to be applied, to spas. And one of, a very well known, well, it was Canyon Ranch here in Tucson. They
Yes.
agreed to
Canyon
pilot it.
Ranch.
They agreed to pilot it, and so we got them a piece of equipment, and they basically did what we asked, right? Use it, give us feedback on sound, on functionality, on how user friendly is it. And so they were a great partner. They gave us all kinds of feedback, and that was the beginning of really of all of the equipment that we have now. So we learned a lot, and it evolved, and it changed into different things. But at the same time, as a consultant, we were really looking for options for steam saunas, right? Because they were moldy and they, hard from a maintenance
Mhm.
standpoint. And I said to Steve, like, we need to, like, there's got to be something there that we can do. And infrared was starting to get more popular as well, right?
Yes.
And for a whole bunch of reasons, we like infrared because it's easier to maintain, less health contraindications, right? It doesn't get as hot. Anyway, so I kept saying to Steve, we need to combine these two things because there's a space that's allocated for something that they need to fill. Let's
Yes.
let's make it more multidimensional and add more benefits into this space, right? Anyway, so that's when the Halo sauna was born. And I was adamant that, like, there has to be a way to bring these two modalities together. And of course,
Yes.
they,
And, and isn't it amazing now that our Halo sauna, now our Halo Red's quick, it's nipping at its heels, but our Halo
yes,
sauna is still our top seller. That's starting to change rapidly with the advancement of our Halo Red technology, especially
right.
our Halo Red O2. But yes,
Yeah,
people love our Halo sauna, so that's
yeah,
fantastic
yeah,
that you guys were at the tip of the spear. And I mean, now we think about that Halo sauna as, a five sensory breathe and detox suite, five modalities layered in. So you guys really hit the nail on the head when you were conceptualizing a multimodality experience. So we're all grateful. Those of us that are downstream of all these relationships, we're all grateful that you guys thought about those days. And I think one of the folks back then would have been Lisa Simmerly too. Would have probably been in the mix at some point back then, around 10 years ago or so.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we thank you guys for at that point in time. We always wax philosophical and have that think outside the box phraseology now. You guys are definitely thinking outside the box before it was cool to think outside the box. So,
Well, and and we didn't know the effect, right? Like, all of that happened before COVID,
mhm.
and what happened coming out of COVID is massage therapists didn't come back. We had, and we still do. We have a labor shortage, and when people started coming back, they didn't necessarily want to be touched, right? And obviously, Steve was really one of the very first. Halotherapy was really one of the very first touchless wellness experiences. And so again, it's like that perfect timing of, here's a
Yes.
solution. Because spas had been closed, a lot of them, for a long time. They were reopening, but the staff wasn't coming back. And most spas prior to COVID, 70% of their revenue, this would be global,
Hmm.
came from massage. And now that, like, right, they were labor dependent on delivering massage.
Yeah.
And so that was part of my argument, was you need to find other ways to deliver meaningful health benefits to your guests or members, or whatever kind of vertical. And this is a solution. You can charge for it, and, like, there's enough science and data behind it, and you don't need a massage therapist. And so that was, at the time, no one was really talking about net profit, right? But when their revenue
Hmm.
started to shrink all of a sudden, so it's just, I mean, COVID did a lot of really good things for us. I mean, us in general, I think, not only from a
Yes.
business standpoint, from a human standpoint, because then wellness became more accessible. And what I loved about Halo therapy in particular was that you could apply it, into a day spa, into a high end resort, into a city hotel, right? It was so versatile that,
Yes.
for me as a consultant, I was grateful to have that, because it was something that I could, obviously recommend to our clients. Yeah. So that's the story.
Yeah, that's
And
amazing.
and early on, Steve and I got another pilot in Hong Kong. We flew to
Hmm.
Hong Kong, and oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on. It was a Mandarin, and they put a Halo sauna in as
At a
well.
Mandarin hotel.
It was a Mandarin, yeah. Um,
Yep.
and again, it was one of those things where they wanted it to be private, so we were able to start to see the diversity. Yes, it could be something that was added on to a treatment, but it could also be a suite. And they actually
Yes.
went as far as having, like, guided meditation, so there would be another person in the room while they were in the booth,
Hmm.
um, working on their breath. They just, I mean, obviously, right, because Mandarin's a luxury brand. So it was in those early days, it was interesting to see how it could be so applicable and so effective in so many different types of wellness offerings. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I always say what I love about halotherapy, it is the perfect either anchor modality or tandem modality because it complements everything else out there. If someone's doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy, granted we don't see that too much in hospitality, but uh, halotherapy is the perfect pre hyperbaric oxygen therapy modality because it clears the lungs, which of
Exactly.
course paves the way for an oxygen rich compressed environment. And then post HBOT, because a lot of people, because they're being subjected to pressurization, atmospheric pressure, their nasal passages constrict,
Yep.
eustachian tubes constrict, respiratory passageways constrict. Halotherapy can help open that back up so that they can have a better post HBOT experience. And really, you could line up every modality in halotherapy because it all starts with respiratory health and getting oxygen in and CO2 out. Halotherapy either sets other modalities up for better success or creates higher levels of efficacy when you're blending it with other modalities,
Exactly.
either simultaneously or in tandem. Perfect modality. So we mentioned hotels, and this is it's such an interesting vertical and segments within that vertical. Mom and pops come in. We have 3 to 4 thousand mom and pops that come into our business each year. We don't go out to them; they come to us, and that's
Hmm.
a pretty easy.
Yeah.
That's a very quick deployment because they're
Yes.
not having to think about worldwide strategy and impacts on portfolio. They're not having to um, they don't worry about missteps as much or aligning with their brand. You're in a world that wellness is proliferating, meaning this hospitality world, this development world,
Yeah.
but it's a much longer life cycle or project development life cycle. So I saw an article from I believe it's Hilton, and this was about 7 months ago, maybe six. And I know you know this team. One of them is Suzanne Holbrook
That's
and
Marriott.
Sarah. Yep. Oh, Marriott. Okay, Marriott. So Marriott, Suzanne Holbrook, Sarah Raymer. In this article, that team was said to be now, at that point in time, tasked with Suzanne Holbrook leading it, Sarah Raymer working with her, finding across their entire portfolio, and Marriott's got a huge portfolio, looking at where, how, and why to integrate wellness in their portfolio.
Hmm.
I think Suzanne. I think you've even given her one of her Halo Pockets. So, how's
Which
that
she
endeavor
loves, by
going
the
with
way.
her? That's awesome. How is that? That's a gargantuan undertaking. How is that? How's that effort going with them at this stage?
Well, obviously the Marriott is the largest hotel brand in the world. It's an incredible position if you think about thousands of properties, right, and different types of offerings. I mean, some, obviously with Marriott, there's lots of different levels to the types of
Yes.
brands they have. So for there to be really one main person at the helm, it's extraordinary. And how she keeps her grace, I have no idea. But brands, because of how large they are and the complexity, right? Because a lot of the brands are a management company. They're not necessarily the owners of that property, right?
Mm,
There's a lot of variables and decision makers involved. And so it's taken a lot longer. So, when I saw Suzanne's article, I was like, oh, finally. Because
yes.
when Marriott starts to talk like that, right, then we know it's going mainstream. And I, one of the biggest things that changed was we don't design and have salons anymore. Like the days of, having your hair done or your nails done. I mean, now there's salons everywhere. Hard, not a lot of profit in them, hard to staff. And so because there's so many of those hotels that, because we used to always build salons, and it's the perfect
Yes.
space to be able to renovate into a more social recovery area. And so that's a lot of what the article was, right? Now, and we've been doing that for, probably 10 years, looking at space, right? Existing properties that want to be more relevant, and obviously more profitable as well. And so this, recovery, this touchless wellness piece has really been a part of that. But now that she's talking about it, it means it's really here to stay. And so, when she asked me about halotherapy, I ended up really sitting down and thinking about, okay, like almost all of their brands have fitness. Now, in some, that's all they have. You walk in the door, right? And the fitness center is right there. It's always open and accessible. And, it might be 150 a night or whatever. But even they can have, like those particular types of properties could have a halo red. Right?
Yes,
They're automatic. They don't need
that's right.
staffing. And how great it would be. You've been traveling, right? It's late at night. The fitness center is open. And, so I basically just came up with, here are all the different types of ways you can use the, the halotherapy products based on if you're super uber high level, like a 5-star, or whether you're, a travel
That's
lodge
right.
next to an airport, right? And so, that's what we're talking about right now, is just the versatility of it
I love
across
it.
all of their brands.
So thinking along the lines of Marriott, of course, like Hilton and other big names, they have everything from corporate owned, let's say, crown jewel assets that are usually corporate owned. They have Marriott flags where they themselves don't own the property, and it's in essence like a franchisee franchisor relationship. A property ownership group or a real estate investment trust might have
Hmm.
5 to 10 hotels, and maybe two of those or three of those might be their hotel, but it has a Marriott flag. It's a Marriott. So how do you see, because that can create gaps in adoption. Do you envision Marriott first rolling out wellness through these programs at their corporate owned facilities, and then as that gets adopted, does that then transition to the flags? How do you see that happening? I know it's a little
That's
bit
a
of a nuanced element,
yeah.
but it's
It's
a reality because most of these folks, they have more flags than they do corporate locations. So I'm just curious about what you envision the best way to close those gaps.
Yeah, from a strategy standpoint, I mean, to me, the lowest hanging fruit is to start with, um, their spas, their flagship.
Hmm.
There's, and the Halo Pocket is so versatile. Um,
Oh
and
yes, it
so,
is.
right. And so, I mean, I'm a really big fan of it. I was actually going to have one. Anyway, I was going to have mine next to me. Um, that to me is the easiest way to kind of to introduce halotherapy, in as an add-on in treatments. I mean, I even thought about, and this isn't just for Marriott, but, um, what they really want to do is they really want to understand their member, right? All of the large
Hmm.
hotels have pretty extensive, memberships. And so, one of the ideas I had was, that members, if they reach a certain tier, actually get a Halo Pocket,
That'd be great.
right? Because then what you're
Yeah.
doing, is you're exploring how they respond to it. You can
Yes.
then, like that's almost like the first thing that you do, is to see how your traditional people that are coming in having treatments respond to it, but then also your members. And maybe it's, something that's, you know, discounted, and they have to pay for part of it. But I thought that's the group that they really want to get the feedback on, because they go, regardless of where they're traveling, they're going to stay at a Marriott or a Hyatt or a Hilton, depending on their membership. And so if they're at that high status, they're going to be really honest and give you really great feedback. And then I think with that feedback, you can then decide, okay, what type of halo therapy product do I need, right? But I think that would be what I would probably start with.
Yeah, I
because you're
love
giving
that.
a gift, right? You're giving the gift of health to your very elite members and requesting that they give you some feedback. And typically, I mean, I know myself with American Airlines, right? If they send out a survey, I'm going to respond because I have a relationship, right? They're my trusted travel partner.
Yes,
And so I don't know what the strategy will be for Marriott or some of the other large brands, but through my lens of understanding, if we start with the consumer that's loyal to that brand, we're going to get the greatest feedback and insight into how to penetrate deeper into the brand.
yeah, it's interesting because some of this article was they were looking at not just strategically across their portfolio, but practically across their portfolio, meaning what square footage could be converted to,
Of course,
they called it either underutilized square footage or inactive square footage, and these hotels have sometimes tens of thousands of square feet that could be it could evolve into a wellness respite just inside their own footprint. There's so much that they can do. It's so interesting. There's an incredible opportunity for, like you mentioned, the Halo Pocket for their top tier guests, and then even the Halo Reds or Halo Saunas. But the Halo Red Auto
so
is
easy. I mean, it's a
so
no-brainer, right?
that's
And
right.
and the reason I like them going into fitness is because the fitness center is open all the time, and
That's right.
people are traveling, they're jet lagged, they're tired, and it's something that obviously is going to make them feel better. It doesn't take a
That's
lot of
right.
time. You can do it several times, in the morning before your meetings or in the evening, and when you first arrive. Um, and that there's always room. I mean, they're not that big. There's always room.
14 square feet. 14 square feet. That's all you need to bring in a
Yeah.
Halo Red one person unit.
Yeah.
Just roughly 14 square feet, 14 and a quarter.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
I
nothing.
think piloting them in select properties and putting them into the fitness center makes the biggest sense because the fitness centers are typically close to the entryway, and I,
Yep.
they're so easy to use that you don't need to have a staff member.
That's right. Which is why fitness is starting to take off for us as a company, because the Halo Red in particular is just perfectly suited for those high value, in this case, high value, low price, or big box or full service gyms that want, as you said, attendantless wellness, low maintenance, high utilization, throughput, get people in, get people out. You know what I always say too? What I love about Halo Therapy is I always tell people it's going to be the most, and to anybody that's listening, it's going to be the most sanitary wellness piece of
Environment.
equipment that you can find. Because, of course, salt's constantly deactivating and destroying virus and bacteria and eliminating microbe activity. And so you have this environment that it sanitizes during the session, so you don't have to do a ton or if any sanitizing after the session. So it's just so perfectly suited for
Agreed.
environments where
Yeah. And
general populations are
you
going.
don't have to, I mean, for me, when I'm looking at, at designing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always thinking about the areas that people are naked and the areas where they're clothed, right? And
Yep.
naked means that you're going into a locker room and you're changing into a robe and you're going and having a treatment, right? And so what I love about halo therapy, red light and the infrared, I mean, is you get a lot of health benefits with if it's at the front end. You don't have to go into a locker room, right? So that's part of why it can go into an area that's after hours, as opposed to having it buried into the spa where it's
Mm-hmm.
fixed hours. Um, so anyway, I like it because it fills a need for areas that are social and areas where everyone has their clothes on, even if it's just fitness. They're not
Yeah,
in not in a robe.
speaking of social, so Alchemize House is um, a company that's bringing
Mhm.
social wellness into the hospitality world. Dana Cook, I believe, is the CEO name. But I spoke to Dana recently as an introduction from a gentleman named Albert Ramos Jr., who's a chief financial officer that helps wellness, fitness, and lifestyle brands. But So when I spoke to him, they have a project at, I believe, W in Beverly Hills,
Mhm.
and they're looking at bringing in their social wellness concept. Exciting project, but the Halo Red is something that he was certainly interested in. He views it as a way to have sort of that premier access because they're going to bring in a number of social elements, but
Yep.
he's going to probably put the think about putting the Halo Red in that premier area of that wellness experience. Um, but yeah, whether premier or otherwise, there's so many uses for the Halo Red. So let me ask you this: so it's no short accomplishment to be the woman in wellness for 2024 at the Global Wellness Summit. I mean, maybe that's a reward of 30 years. You probably maybe it's a long time coming, but what are there's a lot of power in those rooms because I've been to one of those summits. What's that world working on, driving
Mm.
and pushing across the United States and around the world right now? What do you guys focus on there in the worlds of hospitality and wellness as a whole?
So the focus, I would say right now, is on this new term, longevity, that has
Mm,
come out of nowhere, really. And so that's what the last year has really been focused on. And, wellness really drives hotel occupancy, ADR, it flattens seasonality, right? It does a lot for the hotel business. But what it does for real estate and what we're seeing as far as the increase in the sale value, right? The retail value of a home is 10 to 30% more if wellness is built into it. So that's really the conversation is how do we continue to offer wellness in a meaningful way for hospitality, but also for real estate and for mixed use as well,
yes.
because most projects now have both. And so longevity came along, and everyone's like, "Oh, that's great. That's what we're going to do." But to me, wellness has always been about longevity. We're in the business of optimizing aging, right? It's not
Yes.
as sexy as the word longevity, but that's what we've always done. And so longevity is, I think it's an accumulate. It's almost like the evolution of what we've been talking about, right? We had COVID, and then performance and biohacking and recovery
Hmm.
came along, and so now we're kind of moving into this longevity, which is obviously uh, more medical, more diagnostics
Yes.
involved if it's done properly. And so that's what they're really talking about is where does longevity fit and where is wellness in longevity? I was just
Yes.
in Dubai at a conference, the same conference from the one that I was in last year, and it's sort of the wild west. There's a lot going on. Everyone wants longevity, right? And so we see even the brands trying to bring longevity in, and the pendulum often swings really far before it comes back into balance. And so right
Hmm.
now everyone's like really excited about longevity, but the truth of it, with my crystal ball, is that it's going to come back into balance, right? Because at the end of the day, it's sleep, it's nutrition,
I love it.
it's exercise,
Yes.
right? um,
Yes.
and it's it it's what we've always been talking about, and to a certain extent, it's everything in moderation. I mean,
Hmm.
maybe
No,
extreme
you're right.
moderation, right? And so when I hear everyone talking and they're not talking about our spiritual and mental health,
I
and we're
love
not
it.
talking about sleep,
Yeah.
which is
Hmm.
foundational to everything. Yeah, so I that's what they're talking
There's
about,
no
right? Everyone is really excited because it's
nothing more credible than an expert that has bags under their eyes because they don't get enough sleep and they're talking about longevity, right? Now, granted, as we age, Jess, you're still in that wonderful, beautiful age bracket, which we all admire. Just under 30. By the way, happy belated birthday, Jess.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But yeah, I love that, Amy, because you know the there's I was reading something recently from Dr. Peter Attia or Adia, Peter Adia. I even have his book sitting over here.
Yep,
This big old book called
yep.
Outlive: The Science and Art of Longevity. As a matter of fact, this big old
Oh
piece of
yes,
book plug.
yep.
Yep. So I haven't even gotten into that yet. But he says very clearly and categorically, undeniably, that fitness and sleep, as you just said, and nutrition, but fitness and sleep, so important. Sleep, of course, it's incredible. We could do all the diagnostics we want. We could get the biomarkers all we want, but the way to impact that in the most significant manner is exercise, sleep, good nutrition. Those are the hallmark. Those are the basics. You got to get those.
And
Can't
purpose,
forget
right? I
those.
mean, there's a lot
Yep.
more also around the sense of belonging. And I mean, it doesn't have to be, your blood family, but belonging to something, right? And that's why we see these membership clubs, going out everywhere, is because people want to share that wellness experience. And so longevity, it's much more solo, and so I'm confused by it. And
Mm-hmm.
but that, you asked me, that's what they're talking about right now. And you know I'm already starting to see, especially on LinkedIn, people kind of pushing back and going, well, like, what happened to all the things that we know fundamentally are most important, right? And also for
Correct.
me, I want
Yes.
wellness to be more democratized, which is why I like touchless wellness. It's more affordable,
That's right.
typically, right? And so, longevity is the way it's positioned right now, and the way the business models are being designed. They're very profitable, but they're only for the 1%. And so, I look forward to longevity finding its place, because it will.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now it's like the new buzzword, right? That it'll come back into balance, and we will remember as humans, right, the importance of sleep, and
Yeah, that's so important.
love and belief, and that we have purpose in our lives, right? I mean, that's a lot of what we got out of the blue zones. Was, yes, they ate well and they slept well and a lot of those things, but the biggest thing that affected their health span was this sense of belonging and purpose.
Yeah, that's so incredibly
It's
important.
simple, right?
It's very
Simple.
simple, and we need to certainly keep that front and center,
Yes.
just simply based on the kinds of beings that we are, because we're not just physical, we're emotional,
Right.
and emotional, mental is tied in sometimes to the emotions, but there's the mental side, obviously that psychological element, spiritual, we're certainly that, in many respects,
Yeah.
and the sentient beings that we are. It's
Exactly.
all we got to do is look no further than when we, as humans, because we know that life, contrary to what maybe Gary Brecka might want to, you know, tell us. I'm not so sure we're going to live to 150, but if he and his team can somehow find that out, then that'll be fantastic. But that being said, um, tomorrow's not promised for any of us. So I even wrote an article on that recently, that you can certainly reconcile the pursuit of wellness and being whole. Love that word you used earlier, Amy. Being whole, and balancing that with the reality that we're not living forever, which is why perhaps we should continue to try to be as whole and as well as possible, because we're not
Today.
going to live forever.
Today.
Today, exactly. Now, not
Yeah.
tomorrow. Now.
Longevity focuses, it's very future focused.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it takes us away from probably one of the most important things, which is appreciating today, right now, this moment. Mindfulness still continues to be, in my opinion, the greatest tool that we have available to ourselves, is to
Yes.
be in the moment
And
and be present and appreciate,
it's
right? I mean, gratitude is such a
Mhm.
simple thing and so powerful to our
Mhm.
mental health and physiologically, that, it's, anyway.
it's interesting. So we're working on a project. I don't know if you've heard the name of the project. It's Pike's Waterfront Lodge.
Mm,
Pike's is a very unique hospitality asset owned by a gentleman named Jay Ramross, who is native to Fairbanks, Alaska. He grew up there. He was even in legislation there for a little bit. But that's his world, Fairbanks, Alaska. And he has this very unique hospitality asset, and it looks like a lodge, and it's right on a river. And during the winter, you see sled dogs going across the iced over river, and during the winter, which is now, you'll have snowpack to the tune of 5 to 6 feet. And it's very frigid temperatures, but he's going all in on wellness, but also experiential and meaningful and um, somewhat spiritual experiences for the members that come. So he's bringing in. Speaking of our equipment and wellness, they're doubling down on wellness. They originally were just going to do a salt generator in a room, but now they're taking orphan spaces and they're going to have a guide. You go upstairs, there's a crystal lounge. They're knocking out 3 hotel rooms. They're having backlit Himalayan salt brick, and you're going to have some hot teas, and there's a nice crystal structure with some chromotherapy in these crystal structures. And then you will go into a experience where you have hydro massage, and then there's the halo sauna in there. And then the very next room through arches is a salt room, which will be an aurora borealis experience, because
Nice.
he wants people to get really in touch with
Yep.
Alaska, and they're going to have this native Alaskan voice talking about this journey of, believe it or not, the fish and a bear, and it's just with a native Alaska voice. And
Of
then the
course.
very next room is going to be a brain tap room, and then down in their they have this emerald building, which is fully glass, which they were originally using for aurora borealis viewing, but they're turning that into a halo red sanctuary. So 3 halo reds in that room, and then they're going to have a blue building, which is going to be a halo CBD experience. And then you go along this trail along the river, and then there's this earth ball with aurora borealis just rotating, and they're going to have binaural beats. And anyway, they have this whole experience, and then they have reindeer. They have a kissing bridge. They're going to have ice cream, believe it or not, in this wellness experience. They're going to take people out to the Chena hot springs for
Wow.
a hot springs experience. And so they're doubling down on this because of a lot of what you're talking about. It's they want people to be able to now, when they're there now, be able to have world-class wellness, but blend in the
Well, it has to be
spiritual aspect.
relevant to the place. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, but working hard. So I say all that to say, you have places like Abu Dhabi, Sammy Ibrahim, the director of Spa and Wellness, and they're scrambling as a larger organization to try to do what someone like Jay can do, because he's not hemmed in by
Right.
global brand.
Right.
And he's
Standards.
more nimble. He can
Yeah.
move faster.
Yeah.
How do we get the larger brands? Maybe they will never move faster. How do we get them to move
They,
faster or move more strategically?
I don't know that it's possible, because of the complexity and the volume and the scalability, right? And the diversity within one brand. And so they are moving. It's just slower. That article was
Yeah.
really extraordinary. That Suzanne had written, that's the interview that Suzanne did, because that's the largest brand really making a statement about wellness. So they're moving. It's just,
Yeah,
it's slow.
that was
I don't know that we can speed it up.
yeah, and I think that's such a great point that you make. I think we and by the way, maybe we ought not speed it up, because we're talking about a brand that is one of the most highly respected and important brands in the world of hospitality. So maybe supposing that we ought to speed something up is really the suboptimal way to go about it.
And
anyway.
because when we do that, we risk failing, right? Timing is everything. And like, we've done some work in senior care that was brilliant. I mean, just some of the best work we've ever done. But the owners wanted it and agreed to it. But then when we tried to implement it, there was pushback, right? Because the operators, they couldn't find the time, right? There was so much more infrastructure that needed to be added, and they needed to buy into this whole new concept that we were presenting, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And because of that, they just said, nope, we're not going to do wellness, right? And that was a year of work, that so it's not just convincing the owners or the people with money. It ends up being the people day to day that run it that have to be able to really deliver and believe in it. And so that's tricky, right?
Yeah, it's
Across
tricky.
so many cultures and so many different types of staff. Hospitality is complex, but more so with Marriott. I mean, with the bigger ones, right? Marriott and Hilton and
Yeah, the big
Accor.
ones.
And yeah.
And it makes sense, of course, if we just really think about it logically. These brands are solidified in the marketplace. Swings in strategy that don't align with their core offering can directly impact their bottom line. And they're also, if you think about it, they're also not just considering, yes, profitability overall, because they're publicly traded companies, but they're also thinking about sustainability. And so you can't just throw something in haphazardly, which, by the way, is why I think halotherapy is positioned so nicely, because the more that they'll learn about halotherapy and how unique halotherapy is, in that it's the only modality that, yes, addresses respiratory health, but it has a metaphysical aspect to it. It creates very clean indoor air environments. Anytime you convert any space, room, or booth into a halotherapy environment, it you have this wonderful task to help connect all
Yes.
those dots. And I know it probably feels good to know that as you have these conversations, along with everything else that you're doing when it comes to wellness modalities, you have halotherapy that, if they as they understand it, is certainly unique in the world of wellness.
It's unique and yet it's so simple, right?
Hmm.
It took a long time for people to understand that halotherapy was not a salt room, right, without a
Yeah.
generator. And I think that that's still one of our obstacles is just the education piece. But it's obviously it's come a long way, but it takes time.
Yeah, it's speeding up. Yeah, man, that's such a great point, because yeah, I'm probably going to talk to somebody today that's going to come in and bounce the question off of me that goes, so let me ask you this: if I put some salt brick on a wall, that's salt therapy, right? I mean, we still get folks that are presuming that
Of
that's salt
course.
therapy, and um, yeah, so that's such a great point. All right, so we're heading quickly into 2026, and it's
Yes.
hard for me to believe that 2025 just blitzed past us the way that it did, and now we're
It
staring
really
the new
it
year
really
in the
did,
face.
didn't it?
It did indeed. What are you excited about in the world of hospitality, uh, you know, multi-unit, the development world, the mixed-use space? What projects are you excited about in 2026?
Um, I think it's a couple of things. I'll right now I'll talk a little bit about some of our current projects. Um,
Yes.
I
Yes.
love seeing, and most of our clients are private. They're private owners. Um, we're seeing more integration of family and multi-generation. So, we're creating programming and spaces where families can move through experiences together. Like the days of couples coming to a resort and dropping their kids off at the kids club and then going off and doing whatever they want to do. Like now they're all together, and they're bringing grandparents as well. So that to me is really exciting. I've always sort of looked at wellness as, for many, many years, we were focused on the 35 to 55, right? This is before COVID.
Yes.
And I kept saying, yeah, but so much of what we do is applicable to people that are 65, 75, 85, right? Like moving into more of the senior care piece. But also so much of what we do is also for like what are we doing about teens? Like what are we doing,
Hmm.
right? And what are we doing for children and for families? And so we're really looking at all of that. And halotherapy is helpful, um, because it's something that a family can do together, and it's great for elderly and it's great for really young, right? Because we all have respiratory challenges, and obviously asthma's continuing to increase in the population. So anyway, so I think family is one of them. The other piece is more experiences. So we're really moving away from the traditional treatments and doing a lot more with nature, whether we're bringing nature in through technology or like the example that you gave about Alaska, right? But really starting to become more relevant of where those hotels are being built or the communities are being built. Um, Membership is huge, and right, we want to be social, and the days of separating the hotel guests from like the locals, that's been over for a long time now. Everyone wants to come together, and so um, the social and sharing wellness experiences, bigger saunas and bigger groups, right? And I
Yes.
think that Gen Zs and Gen Xs in particular are driving a lot of this, which I'm very grateful for, by the way. And then the other thing that I really want to see is more focus, and this is what's happening. More focus also on planetary health, because I think that the younger generations are much more attuned to that. And so, we are going to, I believe we're going to see more and more of these independent properties coming along that are solar powered. I mean, they're very regenerative. They're, built to really regenerate the land, not just kind of rape everything, take everything away and then build, right? So it's a much more holistic conversation that's starting to happen. And it's always the independents that move more quickly, right? Because they don't have the brand standards and all of the risks that the large brands have. But that's what we're seeing is more inclusive, more accessible, and when I say inclusive, not just from a financial standpoint or from a cultural standpoint, but more inclusive from the standpoint of families being able to do stuff together. So that's sort of just a snapshot of the projects that we have, and this is ranging from Mexico to Croatia. I mean, it's really across the board. Similar shifts.
Yeah, that's I love that because that's the benefit of being on live. Hold on one second. So one of the things that makes me think about is it makes me think about, you know, prior to Halo Therapy Solutions, I was the director of energy solutions for a construction management firm in the Mid Atlantic, and the projects that we worked on in and around the United States were with some of these larger brands. One in particular was Marriott Downtown Waterfront in Portland, Oregon. What an awesome place!
Mhm.
But even then, and this was 13 years ago, wellness, creating healthy indoor spaces, and thinking about how to, let's say, optimize the experience for the guest. It was top of mind then, and so I know we can suffer from this phenomenon where we sort of have this recency bias and think that maybe wellness has been sort of this amazing thing that's been happening in the last 5 years just because of how it's exploding. But if I trace it back to even myself just 13 years ago, I remember now hearing wellness and indoor air quality and still even then trying to cut through silos and how to bring in fitness and how to create a better experience. So
Right.
it's interesting as I now harken back to that. Yeah, I remember those conversations. I was mainly thinking about electricity and reducing their spend to make them a more profitable
Yeah.
asset, but wellness was top of mind for their facility managers, for their general managers, obviously their management teams. And that's the space you've been in for 30 plus years. And here we all are now, kind of on the tail, your tail, you're on the coat of the tail of your coat saying, hey,
I was
hey,
always I was always a little bit ahead.
yeah,
And it's really very gratifying to see how it's evolving now. Um, and it's never been more exciting than it is right now.
yeah, it's super
Touch
exciting.
more people, to offer better health, not, you know, to be more inclusive is really important.
I got one question for you before we wrap. When's the last time you spoke to Richard Gere?
I haven't spoken to I haven't spoken to Richard since the interview.
Okay.
We have a mutual friend, and so I keep tabs on him. I know I know where he's traveling, and he launched a movie, which name I'm not going to remember now, but it came out just
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago. But I'm hoping to bring him back to some of the events, just because his presence in and of itself is just
Yeah.
extraordinary. And the work that he's doing in Mexico, in particular, following that story, I think of basically a watershed story, right? So they're buying, they bought a large piece of property, not just him. I mean, it's a group, but they're really looking at what happens at the beach and how it affects the top of the mountain, and vice versa, and everything in between, right? So looking at
Mm-hmm.
at the land and the culture and the flora and fauna and everything is sort of one unit, but also how it changes and affects itself depending on where it is in that watershed. And so
Yes.
I'd love to get him to come back and talk about 2 years later where they are, and what and the learnings, like what have they learned from it, right? Because he's very
Yeah, that would be great.
and
I remember that now. I remember that. That was a great interview that you had with Richard Gere there in New York and near Times Square.
yeah,
And I remember hanging on to every word. I think that'd be a great follow-up interview to see how far they've come, see what they've learned, and you keep us notified about that. 'Cause I know
of course,
I'd love
of
to
course.
see that
That's
interview. Maybe even attend it in person. Get him over here, back over here to the United States, and I'll
Yeah,
come.
I mean, he moved to Spain,
Yeah.
and is quite vocal about, not happy with sort of the state of our country, but of course he comes back. So
Yes, of course.
I'll I'll keep you posted.
Keep me posted. Well, Amy,
Abs-
it's been a pleasure having you on, and you know, as I suspected, an hour wasn't going to be long enough, which is why we went an hour and a quarter. We're going to have you on in 2026
Any
sometime.
anytime, anytime.
Yes,
It's really a
it was
pleasure,
a
and yeah,
yeah, it was a
and nice to
thrill.
meet Jess as well.
Yeah, it was so nice chatting with you.
Yeah, great chat. Thank you so much for your time,
Of
Amy,
course,
for your
my
expertise.
pleasure.
Thank you so much for what you do as an advocate and a consultant for Halo Therapy Solutions, and thank you for taking us down, through a trip down memory lane. I say memory lane, but I didn't know a lot of those fun details. So it's been a pleasure having you on. I look forward to having you on in 2026 sometime as well.
Good. I look forward to that. Thank you, and happy holidays.
Happy
Thanks so
holidays,
much, Amy.
everyone.
Happy
Enjoy the
holidays.
rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.